Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to what is already our sixth and last edition of our webinar series, AI in Recruitment. And after a brief pause last week, because we organized the biggest tech recruitment conference of the Benelux, we are back and we want to go out with a bang. So I'm very excited for our final speaker, Siadhal, the co-founder of Metaview, who's been living and breathing AI for the last 6 or 7 years already, ever since he started Metaview. But before I get Siadhal on stage, let me first tell you one more time what we do with Matcher, because with Matcher, we provide embedded sourcing and recruitment teams to startups, scale-ups, and corporates. And our sources and recruiters work fully embedded into your own recruitment teams and can help you scale up whatever roles you have. We predominantly work in Europe, Africa, and the US, and we can already start and help you hire on a monthly rolling contract. So if you have any need, if you need any sourcing capacity, if you're building out AI teams, let us know, because we would love to work with you. Now, please welcome on stage Siadhal.
Hey, so good to be here.
Yes, long time no see. Because just last week, Sal was one of our keynote speakers at TRC, at our tech recruitment conference. And Sal, we do a survey after the conference, and we can already say that your keynote was one of the highest rated keynotes at the conference. So kudos to you. And this is a topic that is has shown a lot of interest, of course, over the last couple years.
We'll go for the most highly rated talk, huh?
Exactly. Well, we didn't get all the feedback in yet, so there's still hope. Hey, Sal, for you, right? Because you started the company in 2017, if I'm not mistaken.
2018, actually.
2018. Okay. 2018. Tell me a little bit more of kind of like that time when maybe AI wasn't so top of mind versus where we are today, and like what you've basically seen and experienced personally.
Yeah, definitely the last sort of 10 to 12 months have been a game changer for our customers and for us. Actually, our product and our service as well has I think really moved to another level. But back in sort of 2018, what the thinking was, listen, we're moving to a world where more and more of our really high impact conversations are being had within arm's reach of a microphone and a camera. So we're obviously doing it right now, but increasingly, even if you were in person, you'd often have meeting rooms with high quality, audio visual equipment in them. And so the thesis of the company was, hey, listen, if we can start to capture some of this data that sits within the hiring process, the interviews being a really big part of what we care about, then we think we can make sense of this data for customers and help them do a better job by using some of the predictive AI techniques that were available at the time. So it's less about sort of an AI revolution that we were banking on. It was more about actually using existing techniques, but with a new data source, which is conversations. Now, the thing that's changed massively in the last 12 months is our ability to pull meaning out of those conversations has 100x'd. Like we used to be able to sort of pull out things like, okay, well, what was the candidate talk time? How many questions were being asked? Maybe some sentiment analysis that wasn't always accurate. Whereas now you can just pull out, it's almost like you were there, right? You can ask the AI question about what happened and you get a perfect answer. So the founding thesis has remained very much the same, that, hey, if we apply the latest AI techniques to this data set, we can pull out meaning. It's just massively accelerated in the last 12 months.
Wow. And did COVID play in your favor with everyone like moving online and like microphones and cameras were all of a sudden present at every single meeting? Has that been a catalyst for growth for Metaview as well?
It's sort of hard to say, because we were just starting to get traction really as a business, our initial traction when that hit. So initially it was a dent, but then it's hard to know whether we sort of accelerated more or whether we would have picked that up anyway. So I'd probably bet on, hey, like the move to remote for most hiring processes now, like even many companies who started to do hybrid or sort of are pulling people back to the office, they're still maintaining their hiring process. A big chunk of their hiring process is as remote. There are a bunch of advantages, easier to get hold of candidates, etc. So I think it's probably been a benefit for us. Yeah.
Interesting. All right. lot of different questions, and I'm sure more questions are gonna pop up during and after your keynote. For people watching the live stream, please type in your questions in the chat. So we'll collect them all at the end and try to answer them as good as you possibly can. So good luck and thanks for being here again.
Thank you. Hey folks, so as you know now, I'm Siadhal, co-founder and CEO at Metaview. We started Metaview back in 2018 with a mission to build the AI co-pilot for hiring. So we have a really special focus on leveraging AI to help recruiters save time and have better conversations with candidates. We really believe that these conversations and interviews with candidates are the most important part of our hiring process. And the fact that they're so unreliable and arduous is a really big problem that we're focused on solving. So I sort of mentioned it in the conversation there with Adrian, but we've been working on this problem for a while. But it's really these recent advancements in the broader AI ecosystem, things that sort of sit well beyond the powers of Metaview, that mean that our ability to solve these problems has massively accelerated. So just about us, we work with amazing companies like Brex, Robinhood, Playo, Katawiki, Huddle, Adavinta, and hundreds of others. And the last 10 months of innovation has been a game changer for both us and of course them. So yeah, the context of this session, you can definitely color me an AI optimist, and I'm here to share more about my perspective on the very optimistic view I have on what AI is going to mean for recruitment. Let me just jump in and share my screen. Oh, I already am. Great. So there's obviously been lots of talk across industries about the impact AI is going to have on labor generally. Again, far beyond sort of the recruiting industry in particular. Even jobs that have long been considered, the most high skilled, the most creative, seem to be sort of under the microscope here. From software engineers to actors to music artists, children's story writers, doctors across the planet. People are aware that AI is going to change the work we do, and are naturally pretty anxious about what that may mean for our livelihoods. Just to pull out a few specific examples here, you've got software engineers sort of looking down the barrel of this scenario where AI co-pilots look set to be responsible for writing 80% of code in 5 years' time. If a music artist such as Drake are seeing AI programs doing incredible impersonations and creating new novel songs that are nothing actually to do with the artists themselves. For a long while now, you've had doctors finding that actually AI outperforms them at some key tasks that they have historically been responsible for. Identifying illnesses or diseases within scans and X-rays, and writers as well. Like, I think of my own experience with a couple of young kids. I often, in fact, more often than not, use ChatGPT to help me tell my daughters a personalized custom bedtime story. That is obviously, less use of children's books, more use of AI to help me come up with these personalized stories. So again, even these really creative jobs are being impacted. Obviously, what we're finding is it's not just journalists and experts who are opining on this, right? It seems to be the topic du jour for everyone on LinkedIn, X, everywhere you look, people are talking about AI and what it's going to do to the world. And it seems like you sort of can't get away from it. And I appreciate the irony there. I'm not really helping there with this, but what I feel is that a lot of the time, or too much of the talk, is what I would consider doom mongering, sort of talking about the worst possible outcome. Now, while I can't pretend to be able to predict the future of what our jobs will look like, in complete detail, of course, that's far beyond me. I can say a couple of things with certainty. Every time we have a technological leap forward, we've experienced as a species these two things. One, more output for less effort. That is what technology is. That's essentially, as far as I'm concerned, that's the definition of technology. If you get more output for less effort, that's what technology is there for. And two, we've often had better, safer, higher paying jobs as a result of these technical revolutions. So two things that I would at least consider very good, more output for less effort, plus better jobs for the people on the planet. And I see no reason why that will be different this time around. What I can also say with real confidence is that through these historic technology revolutions, people did get left behind. People that sort of clung on to how things were, were disrupted. They did experience, I guess, friction and pain as part of that. And so I really think that fortune sort of favors those brave enough to adapt quickly to the new normal. And I think AI will be no different. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that for recruiters, AI should not be seen as a threat, both because I actually don't believe it is, but also because it's not the best way to think about it, even if it is. It should be seen as an opportunity to do higher impact, higher leverage work, work that involves more of the tasks that you love and less of the tasks that suck, or maybe even that you hate. Where human interactions and relationships become sort of the king, the core of your role, and where robotic admin is really delegated to the robots, and where recruitment processes and decisions are awash with insight and collaboration like we want them to be. I heard this really sort of cool phrase, I guess. I can't remember where I saw it, but it stayed with me, and I think it's a good one to share, which is, it turns out we've been doing the robot's job this whole time. So I think that is something that, again, I would encourage people to take away. There's a bunch of work that we're all currently doing that is actually pretty robotic, and that's exactly the stuff that we're going to be able to wave goodbye to. So yeah, in fact, it's my belief that far from threaten recruitment, AI will actually save recruitment. I think that AI is almost uniquely, but certainly better placed than the vast majority of other professions to thrive as a result of this revolution. And that's for a really simple reason. At its core, it's the most human-centric function within any organization. It's full of sort of nuanced, synchronous, rich conversations between human beings, playing on sort of feelings and emotions to sort of make the match and broker those relationships, judgments about human beings, often without a full picture. It's never realistic to have a total picture of these people. And all of those things are going to be one of the last things to be handed over to AI. So it's everything else that's going to be jettisoned. So really, if a big part of your job, is moving pixels around a screen or other things that are very sort of software focused, then there's going to be real changes there. But really in recruitment, the focus has always been the people. And I just think that will become even more the case as part of this revolution. So to summarize how I think the sort of the before and after looks, and we'll actually go a lot more deeply into this before and after in a second, the high level way, sort of the high level opportunity for recruiters and recruiting leaders, as they think about their responsibilities and their role, is less drudgery. So less time spent on sort of toil and admin and things that you can do with your eyes closed, and more time in your zone of genius, doing the things that you're actually best at, because you've been able to find an AI to help you with the things that, you're maybe less capable of, or you care less about maybe as well. And also less guesswork and more informed action. So all of the, throughout your day, you'll find you're making a bunch of guesses about what to do next that are really affecting downstream quality of process and decisions. And every single one of those decisions or those guesses are going to be far more informed as a result of AI. For this conversation, for this talk, I really want to focus on the drudgery aspect. So the admin, the toil, frankly, the tasks that suck. And the reason I want to focus on this, one is because that's where I see the majority of the impact being had initially. So for the next, let's say 2 to 3 years, I think that's the thing that we're going to see most of, which is suddenly the bucket of things that can be automated is much larger than it was. And it's going to take us a while to work through all of those, automating those things, and also to work through what fundamental assumptions about how we work do those automations change. And the second reason we focus on this is because I think from a recruiter's perspective, this is the thing, this automation, saving us from this drudgery, is what frees us up to do all of the things we always wanted to do, which we'll talk more about in a second. I have a fun little video we'll share. I'll actually share it with the group afterwards, save us going through it now. So yeah, we'll actually just move forward. So when I talk about less drudgery, what do we really mean, and what do we mean more of? So really sort of simple chart. This is not an exhaustive view at all. I'm sure there'll be plenty of ideas from folks who are attending around other things that could be included here. But just to give you a taster of the way that we see things going. And I would sort of, when you think about how much sort of credit to give me on sort of making these predictions, there are certain sections of this that, I would look at myself and obviously the company, that Metaview being one of the driving forces of. So I have like very high conviction, this is the way things are going. And then others actually that are sort of more tangential to Metaview, and really, maybe even not related to Metaview, but more just to get us thinking about this. I'll go actually down the list and just to sort of enumerate and expand on each of them. But the sort of fundamental thing that I would encourage people to think is, if there are things that you find yourself doing and you're sort of on autopilot while you're doing it, stop and think that maybe you shouldn't be doing so many of those things anymore. And you should find another way for those things to get done, because they are going to get done by an autopilot someday soon. So what does less drudgery mean? Less drudgery means less time spent scouring the open internet for profiles. And it means more time truly understanding the hiring manager's needs and maybe helping them understand, their needs based on the market much more thoroughly. Again, spending that time on advice as opposed to sort of the toil of just scouring the internet. It means less time reviewing irrelevant applicants and much more time actually spent meeting the most relevant candidates, right? It means less time spent on scheduling candidates and interviewers and all of the sort of the pain that is entailed in doing that, and more time doing, again, another thing we've always said we want to spend more time on: preparing the candidate, preparing the interviewers to run a great process and a great interview based on what we currently know about that person and based on your thorough understanding of the role and how they need to fit into the business. Less time on superficial connections with many candidates that, maybe every recruiter sort of has this LinkedIn connection with this kind of, like, it's no big deal. And much more time on deep connections with few candidates. Almost your personal database of relationships becomes much more important in this world. Less time, frantically writing up what candidates or hiring managers are telling you because you feel like you need to be the conduit to shuttle this information back and forth, which is really important, but also, frankly, really hard for a human being to do. And much more time actually engaging with what candidates and hiring managers are saying and reacting to it and persuading and being curious on top of that. And finally, less time corralling and maybe even nagging interviewers about sort of how they need to help you with hiring, and much more time in that advisor role, advising interviewers, advising HMs, and maybe also increasingly, which I think happens a lot, but I think we can be better positioned to do it, holding people to account and holding people's feet to the fire on this really important goal, which is hiring great people. So the one way to envisage this is, and one last thing on these, again, I want to stress, not exhaustive at all. So actually would be really keen to hear other things that folks would love to jettison and maybe have some help with, because that's how we think about our roadmap too. The way to sort of think about it visually is, and maybe in broader strokes, is that recruiting will become bimodal. What I essentially mean by that is there'll be more specialisms within recruiting. I think this is happening already. I think this is going to be massively accelerated by AI. So the way that we think about the way a lot of people in organizations spend their time right now, and again, I would say this is not unique to recruiting, but I think is very true within recruiting, is that really in business, in performance, you want to be spending as much of your time either planning your course of action or executing your course of action. So this planning or performing, that's where you want to be spending your time. Those are sort of the high leverage, money-making activities, planning what to do, performing what to do. The reality is that we spend most of our time sort of bridging the gap between those two with what we call drudgery or admin or the work about work. That's where a lot of people spend a ton of their time. And so you end up with these quite broad roles because we can't have someone who just does the performance aspect. We can't have someone who just does the planning, because actually the bulk of the work is in the middle. So you sort of got to do all of it. What we see in future is as that admin and that toil reduces, you move over to the right-hand side here, where the majority of your time will be spent on planning, how you're going to achieve something, and then actually performing that plan. Specifically how this relates to roles is more folks, what you'll end up with is people who specialize on either side of this blue graph here. So the folks who spend more time on planning will be the folks who think about systems, about processes, maybe about tools that are used as well. Maybe things like sort of employer brand and those sorts of aspects. And you have other folks who really focus on performing. And performing in recruiting means, motivating candidates, persuading candidates, persuading hiring managers about how they should think about the role. That's the performing aspect of recruiting increasingly over time. And people will spend more of their time there. So that's the theory. But I've got theory sucks here. I mean, I don't think theory sucks. I think this theory is important actually, but sometimes it's really great to just bring it to life via a demo. So let's jump in to some real examples. I'm going to focus on the interview process and how we can go about removing drudgery for recruiters, for hiring managers, and interviewers. So Metaview is an AI assistant for your interviews, and it addresses three things that fundamentally suck about recruiting. One, frantically taking notes during conversations with candidates. These are these inflectional moments in how the candidate understands your company. They're the time where you get to learn as much as possible that is unique about the candidate, i.e. it's not available on their LinkedIn profile, on their resume, like everyone else can see. This is a unique interaction you're having with candidates, yet you're just spending the time frantically writing what they said. The second thing that we fixed that AI can solve for us that sucks about recruiting is spending time then reformatting and writing up those notes in a way that is actually useful for the organization and other stakeholders after the call. And then the third thing that really sucks sometimes about interviewing and recruiting is you get to the end of the process and the hiring team can't even remember most of what the candidate said. And you're just at that point like, well, what the hell was the point of that? So let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to jump in now to Metaview. Let's imagine that I'm a recruiter and I've spent my whole day the way I like to, which is I've spoken to 5 or 6 candidates today. I spoke to them over Zoom. Great. I managed to get through and speak to a bunch of people. I thought some of them were pretty good, but now I've got a bunch of work to do to process those people, decide what to do next with those candidates. So what I do is I come to Metaview. And the first thing that's great about Metaview for me is it's taken my notes for me. So you can see here, these are completely AI generated based on a recording of the conversation. It's identified the question that I asked, bullet points summarize the answer the candidate gave, question, bullet points summarize the answer. So I sort of think of Metaview as my assistant. Metaview comes with me to my interviews. It takes my notes for me. The great thing about this assistant is they have no opinions. Obviously, they are there for my benefit. So if I decide, well, you know what, actually, yeah, these notes are great, but actually these were part of the same question. So I'm going to drag and drop and just, can you rewrite that, please, and put that all together? Thank you very much. And actually, I don't want to include this question. This wasn't so relevant. So I'm going to delete that from these notes. That's useful too. And the reason I'm coming here is, again, I've run so many interviews today. I can't actually remember who James was. Was this the candidate I liked, or was this the candidate I wasn't so sure on? Now I've seen the notes and maybe jumped into some of the background. I can click on this view, and it will pick up that moment within the interview to refresh my memory on this candidate. I remember this candidate now. They were really strong. And actually what I want to do is I want to accelerate them through the process. So usually what I do in that case is I would say, okay, well, I've got my notes. Now I need to sort of rewrite the notes in a format that is really useful and consumable to the hiring manager, who's my key stakeholder here. And that might take me 15, 20, maybe even 30 minutes, we hear from customers. The great thing about having Metaview is I can just get my assistant to do that for me. So what I'm going to say to Metaview is, please summarize this for the hiring manager. I can configure this, so I can tell Metaview what I mean by that if I want to, like these particular topics matter, these ones don't. In this case, I've already designed it earlier. So I'm just going to tell Metaview, please re-summarize this conversation based on what I know the hiring manager cares most about. And I'm going to use this template. And Metaview will just instantly reformat my notes for me along these buckets that I designed. High-level experience, example projects, conflicts and collaboration, all the sort of the characteristics and experience points that I wanted to hit. We've organized the notes by that way instead, which is much better for the HM to read. There's a couple of other things I want to change about these notes though. And again, I don't really want to be writing this out myself. One thing is that I actually want a bit more detail. So I'm going to ask Metaview to rewrite with a bit more detail this time. Please go ahead and do that. Again, Metaview does it instantly. And actually, I have a bit of a policy that I like to, in the initial, certainly in my initial sort of filtering or initial pass through to the HM, or I don't like to sort of reveal too many of too many characteristics about the candidate that aren't important. So I'm going to ask Metaview to remove all gendered pronouns and just refer to the candidate as they, and also not refer to them by name, just call them the candidate. Just helps me know that the hiring manager is reviewing the notes and judging it just based on the information there and not some other assumptions about the candidate. Great. So I've got my notes ready now. This is exactly what the HM wants. I can either push that into my ATS. A lot of the time, what I do is I actually copy it, email it to them or Slack them or something like this. And what I like to do as part of that is also include just a 1-paragraph top level summary of the candidate. Basically telling the hiring manager, why should you take an interest in this candidate? And so I'm going to use Metaview to help me with that as well. So Metaview has pulled out all of the topics that were discussed during the interview. This is dynamic, so it's actually understood the sort of the semantics, I guess, of the conversation and pulled out the topics and is asking me, hey, which topics do you want to include in your summary in your paragraph to the HM? So I'm going to select career overview, future goals, and the technologies they're familiar with. And I'm going to ask Metaview to go ahead and generate that TLDR. Awesome. So Metaview has put together this perfectly worded, perfectly phrased 1-paragraph summary. Again, it's a little bit light on detail. So I'm going to ask Metaview to weight the topics a little bit. I'm going to add more on career overview and a little bit more on future goals. Again, just in a couple of clicks. And now, again, I've got this perfectly phrased summary that I can use as part of my, again, either push to my ATS if I want to, or just copy it and use it when I'm when I'm sort of presenting the candidate to my HM. Now, sort of sidebar from the demo here, one of the reasons I wanted to show you this feature is because I think it's a really sort of conceptually a really interesting example of how you should think about how you might work with AI in the future. I, as the recruiter, I was responsible for some really important decisions. I was responsible for which topics did I want the summary to cover, because I know, I understand what the HM wants. I understand what the role's about. I understand what's important to the business. I also understand what parts of this candidate's profile were most interesting. So I've made that judgment. Still very important that I do that. But then Metaview's AI has actually just put together the copy, saved me having to sort of rack my brains to try and finesse this monologue. And the same thing goes with the notes. Yes, Metaview sort of took my notes of everything we said. Of course, I decided what to ask. And then I also decided what parts of that conversation were the things that were most salient for the hiring manager. So again, it's a great example of human judgment combined with AI's sort of improved ability to generate this content for me. Great. I've passed this over to the HM. They're excited about them too. We're going to clear some time in their calendar for as soon as possible so that we can talk to this candidate, because we both agree this is a really hot candidate. I do have some admin to do. I need to push some data into the scorecard. I hate writing up my scorecards because a bunch of the time it's just me regurgitating what the candidate told me. What I used to do actually was I would just have the ATS open in front of me during the conversation, and I would just like fill in the boxes as frantically as I could. And sometimes the scorecards weren't very well written. Now I don't worry about that at all because Metaview actually does it for me. When I pull in the scorecard, which is from my ATS, so Metaview is not the home of your scorecards. Metaview is assisting you in writing your scorecard. And any field that Metaview sees that is we consider an objective field, i.e. asking for objective information that was gathered from this call, Metaview pre-fills for me, which is totally magical because it means I don't have to worry about it. I can still add to it, good fit or something like this, but just regurgitating what the candidate said, that is not something that humans, recruiters are going to do anymore because there's just no point. A, it's not high leverage. B, frankly, the AI is better at it than you. But there are some parts that Metaview can't fill in, like how good were their communication skills, because that's a judgment. So in this case, I might write up my own feelings, like, they're great. And again, Metaview can help me speed up because I can drag and drop in my evidence to save me sort of, evidencing it. But fundamentally making that sort of call is up to me. And I'm going to go ahead and submit that feedback. So that pushes that then into the ATS. Again, something that used to take me sort of 10, 15, 20 minutes each time is now taking me, frankly, a few seconds. Cool. So if you think about the things that I mentioned that suck about recruiting that we can solve with AI, one was frantically writing notes. I hope that's pretty clear how we help with that. The second was then restructuring and reformatting those notes to bring out the insights for the various stakeholders involved in recruiting. I think we've showed you how Metaview helps with that. The third thing, and sometimes the thing that can really bite you, is you've got an amazing candidate, you've got them all the way through the process, and then you get to debrief time and people can't even remember what was discussed. Now, obviously having the recordings can help with that, but no one's really going to review, 6 or 7 hours worth of interviews in order to make a decision. And that's where Metaview's assistant comes in. I can ask Metaview any question about the interviews and Metaview will find me my answer. Let's say one of the things that people are concerned about is this candidate's ability to deal with conflict. And I'm pretty confident that I had a good conversation with the candidate about this during our call. So I'm just going to ask Metaview to bring that up for me. How does the candidate handle conflict with a co-worker? And so just using natural language, just like ChatGPT, except Metaview's only going to look at what we learned during the interview, which is, of course, what I would do. When I'm racking my brains thinking about the interview, I'm just thinking, what did I learn from this candidate? Metaview's going to do the same thing. So I hit enter. Metaview goes through the interview, finds the information it can about these interviews. And what's really great is it always provides citations. So you can see here, we have these bulleted numbers here. Let's review the answer first of all. The candidate described a conflict with a colleague over the best way to implement a certain feature. They had strong opinions. To handle the conflict, the candidate took a step back to understand. Okay, this is great. This is what I remember. This was 3 or 4 weeks ago that I spoke to this candidate now, but I really want to share this with the hiring team. And so I have these citations, which I can pull up. And that shows me the verbatim that the candidate shared, so what they actually said. And I can use that to jump to that moment in the interview and play or share this video with the other people making a decision. So you go from this world where people are sort of umming and ahhing about a decision and sort of really relying on memory and feeling to, in just using a natural language query, getting the exact information, the game tape of the information that you need to make a decision. And so that's what I mean by more informed decisions. It's very practical. It's very on the ground, the way that AI can help me make more informed decisions. Jumping back to the presentation now. So clearly what we focus on and what our customers tell us is that this is a huge time saver. We regularly hear folks saying it saves them about 6 to 10 hours per week if they have a busy interviewing week. We actually had a few folks who have even gone higher than that and said it's closer to 20 hours per week. These are people who really put a lot of energy into writing up their interview notes. So hopefully we can agree this is a huge time saver, but it obviously begs the question, if we save all this time, does that mean we're going to do ourselves out of a job? Are we going to reduce the overall demand for recruiters because each individual recruiter has become so efficient? And the short answer to that is no. So this is a classic example of a Jevons paradox. A Jevons paradox is the phenomenon where the increased efficiency of a resource leads to an overall increase in its consumption, not a reduction in its consumption. So, now that we require, now that light bulbs are much more efficient, you require less electricity in order to light up a light bulb. That doesn't mean that we as a planet, we as a society are using up less electricity. We still use more electricity to light up lights because the market has expanded. More people are using lighting for more scenarios. That's in the grand scheme of things. Or in the example you see here, people are using more fuel than ever, despite the massive gains in fuel efficiency. So the quote says, these new cars are so efficient, everyone's driving everywhere these days, which I think gets the point across. So in a recruiter's world, maybe that person on the balcony would be saying, these recruiters are so efficient, they're so proficient, they're so expert and tuned at being recruiters that I'd much rather hire one than try and do one myself, because the delta between me trying to do something and a specialist doing something is just getting larger and larger. They're much more likely to get me a good result because of their true expertise. Or maybe the person will be saying, hey, these recruiters are so efficient that they do so much more than just get, candidates in front of hiring managers, because they actually have the time to do it. The value is increasing. So in the future, recruiters will have more and more leverage as they focus more on the act of hiring and less on the admin. Another way to think about it is, if you think that recruiting has been a sort of a vital function within organizations because of all the admin that needed to get done, you were wrong. It's the other way around. Actually, as you do less of the admin, do more of these high leverage things, that's when recruiting will become even more important. So I hope at the very least that has given you some inspiration. If you master and apply powerful tools like these, and there are others as well, across your recruiting process, just think how much more quickly you will do a better job. And, that is really what business and what performance is about, right? It's doing your job more effectively with fewer resources and more quickly. And when you do that, you become better value for money, and therefore demand increases, not decreases. So one thing is for sure, avoidance is not the winning strategy. So whether you agree with everything that I said, or whether you think some of the things I showed you were cool, whether you think they were sort of misjudged, what is for sure is that avoidance is not going to be the strategy that wins the day for you in your personal career, or for your organization, or however you want, whatever sort of level of abstraction you want to think about it. So I did mention this earlier on, but what I'd really leave you with is, if you're doing something on autopilot, then an autopilot is soon going to start doing that thing. That can be a threat if you let it be. But if you treat it as an opportunity, to focus more on the parts of your job that require critical thinking, that require influencing, that require engaging with other human beings to get things done or to get decisions made, then you'll be in a phenomenal spot. And that goes beyond just recruiting. Even recruiters who do that compared to people in other fields, you'll be in a phenomenal spot, because humans are so much at the center of what we do. So yeah, thanks so much for listening in, folks, and really excited to jam on this and hear any questions.
Yes. Hey, Sal.
There you are. How you doing?
Amazing. Because at TRC, I was hosting a different room, so I didn't see your talk, and now I understand why people. I don't know if you did the exact same talk, but I think the topic at least was similar. Yeah. But now I understand why people really got a lot of value out of your conversation, out of your keynotes, because it was to be told, it was the first time that I really saw Metaview in action as well, and from my vantage point of view, taking manual notes, being distracting during the interview or any conversation that I do over Zoom, how easy your tool works is pretty phenomenal. So I really want to congratulate you. Yeah. And tell me a little bit more, because that definitely struck me a chord. Because for the people that weren't able to attend TRC, one of our keynote speakers was Glenn Ferguson, and he talked about how to put DE&I in action. And I actually did a rehearsal with him during his keynote, and he had a slide saying, but this is our secret weapon. And then his secret weapon was Metaview. And I even asked him, is like, Glenn, hey, like, truth to be told, like, are you sponsored by Metaview? Like, do you get like free accounts or something? Because this almost sounds too good to be true. And he said, no, absolutely not. Because how they use Metaview is actually to see if the hiring managers are not biased, to see if they're asking the right questions. And they had a case when they went back to the interview, a diverse candidate was rejected. They went back to the interview notes that were recorded with Metaview, and they realized that the grounds why the candidate was rejected were not fair, and that actually the hiring manager was biased. Mm-hmm. They were then able to re-engage with the candidate, and the candidate is now hired. And Glenn truly shared this would have not been possible without Metaview. Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit more about that specific user case of DE&I, and like how Metaview, for example, can play a role there?
Yeah, totally. So in some ways, it's really simple. And let me tell you about why I didn't talk about that so much actually in this talk. I think that'll be. I'll answer the question directly first, and then we can almost, because I imagine the folks in the audience may be interested about, you may want this DEI outcome, but it's not always the best way to start actually adopting AI. And I'll talk about why I think that might be the case. So fundamentally, interviews are where these decisions get made. Whether they are made within 5 seconds of the start of the interview in the person's head, whether they're made, after deep synthesis of what I learned from that conversation, whether they're made, during the debrief and other people influence your decision, you're not referring to the resume at that point. You may have had the candidate do a take-home exercise earlier in the flow. You're not referring to that. You are just taking away that what did we learn from these set of conversations, and how do we think this person's going to be a fit in our team? Yep. And so the mere fact that what most organizations still, of course, rely on as their evidence out of those calls is some, rubbish notes that might be written into the ATS that are like a minuscule sort of picture of what happened in the call, or more likely how people remember things and the feeling they have out of the call, is just fundamentally never going to result in a reliably good hire. So the one of the big benefits of having Metaview is that you have the game tape. You can sort of, just like you're a high performance sports team, you can check back what happened in the game, what mistake did we make, and do better next time. And sometimes that could be because, hey, we actually had certain unconscious biases that we were exhibiting. Let's do better next time. Or let's try again. Let's do better next time. But it could be because there's actually just a technique issue. Hey, the actual training of these people, we're not very good at interviewing. It's not anything malicious. We just didn't know what we're doing. There's a ton of things that you sort of will be blind to. And sunlight is a great disinfectant, right? When you shine a light on something, that's often how you solve it. That's really key. And and in many ways, we have a few parts of the product that help you identify where that might be happening. Things like tracking where an interview is very different in shape, in maybe the topics that were covered, or the number of questions and things like this, than others that might sort of lead you to identifying bias. But most of the time, this is why this is such a cool example, where this identification comes from is from the recruiter. They're like, well, hang on, the outcome process does not match up with what my sense of that candidate. And guess what? I've had this problem with this hiring manager a few times now. Yep. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to be the investigator here, and I'm going to see if there's a problem. And I can only do that if I have the data, in this case, the audio recording, whatever it might be. So that's a really key use case. Now, the reason we don't actually, didn't talk about it in this presentation, one is because obviously I don't want to make too much of a Metaview pitch. I want to focus more on the big picture here of what AI is going to do. Yeah. But the other is, when you're thinking about adopting AI, we find it's much better to focus on the universal benefit. Now, don't get me wrong, improving your DEI posture is a universal benefit. But if you're going to pitch Metaview internally as something that we're going to use to find people who are doing wrong, you're actually going to find some maybe even valid.
I would resist it. Yeah.
Really, what we focus on, what our tool focuses on, is where I think AI, this is what I was making the point of, automation is going to be the first place where we focus, because it's just a universal benefit. No one wants to do crappy work. Hiring managers don't want to do crappy work. Recruiters don't want to do crappy work. Interviewers don't want to do crappy work. No one in any industry wants to do crappy work. So that's really where you can get this buy-in. And then once you have this this new data asset at your fingertips, which is these conversations, you can start to be a better coach for the hiring team, which is what Glenn was talking about, where that was not the reason. And obviously I shouldn't put too many words in Glenn's mouth, but there was a few reasons why Katawiki brought in Metaview. That was on the list, but it wasn't like the primary goal, but it was a consequence. So I would think more about what are the universal wins. We're at the foot of a massive opportunity here. We don't have to sort of reach for the really gnarly wins. First of all, you can take some really obvious wins. How can I save people hours in their week? Let's do that to start with. And then as a consequence, you start to get some of those other benefits.
Yeah. Awesome. So thanks for explaining. We have a question. Lenore, sorry. Does Metaview transcribe or analyze non-video interactions?
Yeah, so phone calls are fine as well. And we even have can capture in person. But about 60% or so are video, so Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, whatever it might be. And then about 30% are phone calls. Obviously, recruiters, do a good chunk of their calls on phones. And then the rest is other. With
AI developing, especially now on the pace that it's doing, right? Like, what do you foresee kind of like in the near future for Metaview to kind of like added features and like where do you see the product develop? And maybe do you have like already like a feeling or an idea what parts of especially the recruitment process are going to see even more disruption?
Yeah, I've really focused on the assessment process. So, from, first conversation with candidate, let's say onwards. So I think that's where like I would feel pretty confident that I can offer like a useful, hopefully like maybe even expert perspective. I guess I leave you folks to decide if that's the case or not. But that's really where the part that I know about. So I wouldn't want to sort of comment too much outside of that. But I think the principles that I've laid out, and I'll lay out another framework that might help people. So I talked about how automation is really what we're focusing on. I think the two things that come after, or not necessarily after, but alongside automation, just maybe slightly delayed, will be detection. So finding out things we were previously invisible to, we were previously blind to, because we now are sucking in all this new data and have the ability to ask it questions. If you think about how we used to sort of generate insights, or maybe in many cases we still do, is you would have to have the data. The data would need to be structured. It needs to be tabulated in some way. You need to be able to like, in some way, put it in like either a spreadsheet or a database or something like this. And then you'd need like a very particular skill set to query that data. You need to be able to essentially write code in order to get information out of that data. That's massively changed. One, the amount of data that we're sucking in is now just like, if you really go whole hog, it's like every interaction we're having with everyone ever. And our ability to query it, we don't need to structure it. We can just ask an unstructured question, and we now have these ridiculously powerful AI assistants at our fingertips who can extract the information we need from it. And so our ability to detect things is going to go off the chain. So in the case of interviewing, what that might mean is, hey, Metaview, can you let me know every time there's a candidate who's about to get an offer whom we didn't cover these 3 topics with? And like Metaview will just sort of poll and just constantly let you know that that's going to happen. And you can imagine this at any sort of like layer of the cake of these type of things that you can start to detect, because you can instruct Metaview to do, or an AI system to do it in this really sort of liquid, flexible way. So that's what next one is detection, finding things out that we didn't know. And then the last, I think, bucket, which is obviously the big thorny one, the one that's scaring everyone, and I think the one that maybe is slowing some people down, not everyone, but slowing some people down in their adoption of AI, because they end up putting everything in this bucket, which is decisioning. So at some point, AI probably is going to start to sort of play some role in our decisions, whether that's recommendations like, hey, you're about to make this decision, but did you know that this piece of information, like, that's one way. The other way is now our AI is choosing who to hire. And that's the scary one that, we obviously want to be very, we might philosophically disagree with, for one. And even if we didn't philosophically disagree with it, the bar is incredibly high for us to let AI start to do that. Very similar to self-driving, right? We have, like, at the moment, there's a lot of reports that actually self-driving cars in some of the locations where you have them, it is actually per mile safer than humans. But of course, it's still having some accidents, and that's just unacceptable until we wrap our head around it. So very, very similar. Like, hiring decisions are also really important. So I think that's the way we see it going. Like automation, detection, decision. Those are the 3 sort of like ways to think about that. When I think about it from Metaview's perspective, like very short term, the thing that we really care about most, hiring is a team sport. Most recruiting software is not team software. It's, you know, it's like for the single player, it's like sourcing you do by yourself. You might obviously have some sort of like, you know, collaborations around best practices and things like this, but fundamentally it's a solo pursuit. A lot of the work you do in an ATS is like not really collaborative really. So there's just like not a lot of collaboration within our software, but actually there's a ton of collaboration in the process. You know, when I was a hiring manager at Uber, I was talking to my recruiter frequently, obviously, about these different candidates, like slight recalibration based on this conversation. Oh, actually, given I learned this, maybe we should look for this. Hey, this person was really good. They used to work at this company. Why don't we go and look for some more people from this company? Like there was a highly, you know, unpredictable, but still like thoughtful process that involved a lot of collaboration. And so that's where we think both us, but also AI can start to provide this really, can move those interactions to the next level, because you can start to do those collaborations within the context of the information you have. So just to sort of maybe bring an example of what I mean, maybe there's a bunch of folks who are on this who are sort of watching, who are part of, you know, product companies, and they'll have designers and engineers and product managers and all these folks. And a lot of the time, those folks will spend time collaborating on design. And the way that collaborating on design used to happen was like the design of the product. The way that collaborating on design used to happen is you usually have like either every 1 or 2 weeks, a meeting to go through some designs that, you know, have been designed, and then we'd critique it. Now, sometimes those sort of stage gates still happen, but the vast majority of collaboration now happens within the context. It's like, hey, I'm going to invite you into my canvas. Like I'm thinking of Figma as the tool that we use, for example. And I want you to point to the things that you think are good, point to the things you think are bad. We can talk about this, talk about the pros and cons, build up another sort of version. So the collaboration is happening within the context of the design process. And that's the way that's the sort of future vision for hiring that we have. How can we pull the collaboration that does happen in hiring in just a more of a staccato way? How can we pull it into a central place where everyone has the same context, because we actually have the asset, which is the information about the candidate right here.
Yeah, I love that. Hey, and with your point of view, right? So Metaview is obviously a very useful tool for recruiters and sourcers alike. What other tools have you seen where you say it's like, hey, you know, these are some of the tools right now that could really, you know, get us on the bell-shaped curve?
Yeah. Well, the ones that I've heard, it's more like what I've heard good things about from other folks. So I've heard pretty good things about some of the emerging AI sourcing tools. I have some ideas of actually how maybe it could be done better, just because I think, again, conversations are a really important part of understanding what to source for. So that's that for now. But I think one of the really good things about some of these sourcing tools is they have the right pricing method. I know that seems like super low level detail, but I think it's actually really good. I think it's really important when we're adopting these tools, is because the way that these AI sourcing tools work is it's only when you get a candidate that is sourced for you by this AI that you want to speak to that you pay.
Yeah.
Obviously very, I guess in many ways similar to the contingent model, but without the sort of the human element. So there's a couple of tools out there. I know I've heard good things about HireFlow that's emerging. And I'm not exactly sure of Gem's capabilities there, but there's obviously a bunch of tools that are doing those sorts of things. I would also, I had a really good chat with less AI focused, but obviously it doesn't have to be. It's more about up leveling our skills. But I'm quite a big fan of the almost the candidate facing candidate experience tools. So guide.io and candidate.fyi I've heard good things about too. So yeah, those are some other things I think are doing interesting things. I honestly, I try not, obviously I don't want to talk my book too much. I do think that when you think about, again, what AI is now capable of, harvesting masses of unstructured data and then helping you do something with it is like the big thing. And that is conversations. Like we didn't used to do anything with these conversations apart from try and pick out pieces of information ourselves and write it down. That's like a massive thing that's changed. So I do think that the interview process will probably be one of the bigger beneficiaries of this compared to sort of other sort of portions of the hiring life cycle.
For we're almost out of time. For our listeners right now, but also the viewers that are gonna watch the recording, what is the best way to get in touch with you? Is there a free trial? What are the price points for Metaview? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so get in touch with me. Would love to connect with folks on LinkedIn. I try and keep people up to date with our, we're iterating like crazy at the moment. So good way to stay up to date with the latest features if you're interested in the product. And maybe I say some interesting things every now and then as well. So feel free to connect. If you're interested in checking out more about Metaview, one, feel free to message me and I can coordinate. You might also want to go to our website. So it's metaview.ai. And if you mention when you sign up, it is a free trial, as you mentioned. Usually the free trial is just for 5 interviews. So you get your first 5 interviews free. Literally, you can be up and running in a few minutes. It's not like some big implementation. Again, think of this as me getting a personal assistant, or if you're a recruiting leader, I'm going to get a very cheap personal assistant for my sort of, my team of recruiters or whatever it might be. So you can get up and running really quickly. And as matcher, I guess the folks that are observing or sort of watching this back, if you mention that this is where you heard about Metaview, then your free trial can get extended to a month. So you can really get a feel for the product.
Oh, amazing.
And after that, if you decide to use it, pricing is totally transparent. If you just want to use it as a sort of in your recruiting team, then we charge a fee per recruiter per month. Yep. So it's 50 USD. So let's say 45 euros or so per recruiter per month. Yeah. Which, given we save you about 40 hours per month, is pretty per person is pretty good price. Yeah. If you say, well, actually, no, I want this for more than just recruiters, then we'll have a conversation to work out a custom package. Because obviously, if you're rolling out to people who interview very infrequently, you don't want to buy them a seat. You just want them to So pricing is very transparent. If you're just buying for your recruiting team, $50 per month. If you want to buy it for the whole company, then we should have a conversation.
Amazing. So it was such a pleasure to have you on, and especially for me, I've been taking a lot of notes, and I already spoke to you at the dinner after the conference. Can't wait to see on how we can implement Metaview within our organization. But this has not only been about Metaview, also getting in the thought process of AI and what it can do for the recruitment world. It's also nice and refreshing to have someone speak about AI in a very positive way and how it's going to help us and reduce all of these mundane tasks that are driving everyone crazy, right? Versus the doom and gloom. So also thank you for sharing that positive note, Sal. And looking forward to following your journey and what AI is going to bring to the recruitment industry.
Thanks so much, Adrian. Great couple of events. Great event in Amsterdam last week, and an awesome set of webinar series. So congrats on that, and thanks for having me on.
Thank you. All right, that's it. It's a wrap. Our AI in Recruitment webinar series is officially over, and it's been a blast. We had over 800 people sign up, and we have many more thousands of people already watching the recordings. Thank you so much for taking part in this webinar series. We are going to send a survey, so please be so kind to share your honest and direct feedback, whether that's good or bad. We would love to hear from you, and stay tuned, because at the beginning of the year, we're going to launch our sourcing webinar series again. So thank you so much for dialing in. My name is Adrian Kolb, and I hope to see you very, very soon.